Welcome back, Focus Learners, to today's Explainer. Have you ever looked out at a sprawling landscape and just wondered, why is that specific tree or that particular animal exactly there and literally nowhere else? Well, today, we are going to deconstruct the complex, hidden blueprint that governs exactly where plants and animals live.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our step-by-step roadmap for uncovering this hidden architecture. We're going to cover the myth of luck, the non-living architects, nature's invisible fences, survival by design, and finally, wrap things up with the human cheat code.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the myth of luck. You know, in professional land use planning and modern ecology, biological distribution is absolutely never viewed as a product of chance.
When we look out at a dense forest or, say, a wide-open savanna, it is so tempting to just assume life arranged itself by total coincidence. But let me tell you, luck is a complete myth. Every single living organism out there occupies a highly specific geographic coordinate based on strict environmental rules. Where a species settles isn't an accident. It's a highly calculated, strategic response to its environment.
So let's break this down a bit. Biological distribution is formally defined as the non-random spatial spread of species. It's essentially a strategic response to geographic constraints and biological interactions. And ecologists don't just go out into the field and guess at these patterns. They use a systematic sampling frame called a quadrat, basically a square tool they lay on the ground to measure exactly how species arrange themselves. This simple tool takes us straight from qualitative guesswork right into data-driven hard science.
Now, what's really interesting to see here is that measuring these quadrats reveals three specific geometric shapes of survival. First up, we've got a uniform pattern. This is driven by intense competition for scarce resources like light or space. You'll see this a lot in plantation crops. Next is the random pattern, which honestly only happens when resources are consistently abundant everywhere, meaning no strict spatial strategy is even needed. And finally, the clumped pattern. This gets triggered by highly localized resources, like animals clustering tightly around an isolated water source in the desert. These geometric shapes aren't just random formations, they serve as absolute diagnostic signatures of environmental stress and resource architecture.
Moving right along to Section 2, the non-living architects. Think of abiotic or non-living factors as the ultimate dictators of the landscape. They establish the foundational boundaries for biological viability. At the very top of this command chain, we have the climatic hierarchy. Step 1 is rainfall. Rainfall is the absolute, preeminent boundary setter. It single-handedly decides if an area gets to be a dense, lush forest or if it's doomed to be a sparse desert. Step 2 is temperature, which regulates metabolic rates and forces organisms into rigorous survival modes. Together, rainfall and temperature dictate the absolute macroclimatic limits of where life can even begin to exist. But, once those broad strokes are painted by the macroclimate, the local, secondary gatekeepers step in to micromanage. Take topography, for example. Things like altitude and slopes create these unique, life-harboring microclimates in otherwise hostile regions. Then you have light intensity, which creates a literal biotic ceiling in shaded forests, dictating exactly who gets to claim the territory down below. Wind disperses seeds, but also brings the risk of drying everything out, and salinity acts as the ultimate filter in aquatic environments. All of these site-specific factors act as extremely strict local gatekeepers.
And the difference beneath our feet, it's literally staggering. Let's contrast two soil-related factors. Loamy soil is strategically superior. It offers enhanced nutrient and water retention, acting as a super stable foundation. Contrast that with sandy soil, which has incredibly high leach rates. Vital nutrients are just washed right away. Plus, soil isn't just a medium for plants to grow in. It provides critical shelter for burrowing animals. It is a complete, functioning subterranean habitat.
That brings us to Section 3, nature's invisible fences. Now we shift our focus to the biotic factors. If the non-living elements set the boundaries, these living factors are the negotiators that finalize the map. These living interactions are what we call density-dependent. Basically, these are biological pressures that intensify as a population grows and resources hit their natural limits. Make sense? As space and food run out, the struggle for survival becomes far, far more restrictive. The map gets crowded, and the rules of the game get a whole lot tougher.
These intense pressures create what ecologists refer to as invisible fences. First, you have competition for limited resources like light and space. Strong competitors can absolutely dominate an area, forcing rivals out and creating that uniform distribution we talked about earlier. Then there's predation.
Predators essentially create high-risk, no-go zones on the map. Prey species will strategically avoid these high predator concentrations just to maintain their population viability. They literally redraw their own boundaries out of pure fear.
But hey, it's not all conflict out there. Distribution is also heavily mediated by social contracts known as symbiosis. You've got mutualism, where both organisms benefit, allowing them to inhabit territories they could never ever survive in alone. Parasitism, on the other hand, is where one thrives at the host's expense, obviously limiting the host's ability to expand. And commensalism is where one benefits while the other is basically unaffected. These managed dependencies play a massive role in deciding who gets to live where.
All right, on to Section 4, Survival by Design. So how do individual organisms actually cross these invisible fences? Well, they do it through some brilliant, highly specific adaptations.
Think of these adaptations as natural patents, biological assets that allow an organism to claim a piece of territory. We have structural adaptations, like incredibly thick bark to survive wild forest fires, behavioral adaptations, like nocturnal shifts to completely avoid the blistering daytime heat, and physiological adaptations, like cacti storing water, or the highly specialized respiration of earthworms. Get this, earthworms actually require moist soil just to breathe. Because of this internal requirement, their presence serves as a critical diagnostic metric for the subterranean health of an entire ecosystem.
To sum this all up, survival by design allows life to claim territory in environments that would otherwise be impassable. These adaptations aren't just quirks, they are literal biological assets. They serve as the internal and external engineering required to make survival possible in the absolute harshest corners of the map. But all of this brings us to a massive, looming question. We've just seen the strict rules of rainfall, temperature, competition, and adaptation. So, can we cheat the rules? And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, the human cheat code. This is where we encounter the anthropogenic paradox, the reality where humans actively attempt to bypass the ancient natural boundaries of biological distribution. There are two main ways we actively alter this biological map. On one side, we have destructive impacts, things like urbanization, pollution, and deforestation that aggressively strip away species diversity and completely degrade stable habitats. But on the flip side, we have expansive engineering, and this brilliantly illustrates what we call the irrigation paradox. By using high-cost engineering to pump water into dry, arid zones, we literally force life to exist where the climatic rules say it absolutely shouldn't.
But using this cheat code comes with some severe strategic risks. Expansive engineering creates highly artificial ecological dependencies. We're essentially claiming territory through unnatural means. If that irrigation stops, if the engineering fails, or if the resource is depleted, the entire expanded biological map instantly collapses. It's a house of cards. Our managed ecosystems are frequently completely disconnected from the actual ground truth climatic realities of their region.
Which leaves us with a critical and, quite frankly, sobering realization. As human-driven climate change alters the foundational rules of rainfall and temperature, the architectural foundations of the planet are shifting. We've learned today that rainfall and temperature are the ultimate dictators of the biological map. If those baseline rules are changing, our highly engineered artificial environments are at massive risk of total insolvency. So ask yourself, will our artificial cheat codes hold up as the natural map of the planet is aggressively redrawn? It's a giant puzzle that land planners, ecologists, and honestly, all of us are going to have to face in the coming years. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.